Welcome to Monday Morning Methane. Today I'm pleased to be joined by Andy Collard, who is Manager Emissions Management at TC Energy. Welcome to Monday Morning Methane, Andy.
Thanks for having me, Thomas.
So, Andy, you and I, we spent a lot of time nerding out about LDAR optimization, and we'll get into some of the nerdy stuff later on. But one of the things I think is pretty cool about you is that you're also very much into fitness. And I remember we were riding a bus together in Austin at the Methane Mitigation Summit, and you learned that I had a love and a passion for beach volleyball. And so, like an optimized LDAR program, you designed an optimized fitness routine and workout program for me to get better at volleyball.
Yeah, fitness has been one of my hobbies since I was, in my late teens. I got a bad concussion playing, recreational sports. And one of the ways for me to kind of keep into it was to just throw myself at the gym and spend every waking hour there. And that has been all consuming ever since. And so anytime someone else expresses a need or interest in expanding their fitness journey, I'm eager to dive right in and help out.
Well, that was pretty cool. We tried recording this yesterday and it didn't work, and I was embarrassed that I hadn't started my fitness program yet. So I started it this morning, so I could actually not have to admit that I hadn't done it yet. So
I put a whole bunch of legs in there so that you can enhance your jumping capabilities. And day two after a leg workout is always the most fun. So you'll have to tell me if you're good and sore tomorrow.
I can't wait till tomorrow. I actually have volleyball tomorrow. But anyways, let's get into the meat and potatoes. We're here to talk about methane. You recently presented on some of the work that you do on optimizing leak detection and repair, or methane monitoring technology deployment, optimizing for cost, for emissions reductions, for safety, at a conference that we went to together in Austin. Before we get into the work that you did, can you share a little bit about TC Energy and some of the unique challenges that TC faces and that have kind of led to the interest in pursuing kind of improvements in efficiency and optimization of LDAR?
Sure. Yeah. TC Energy is a tri-nation organization. We have operations and assets in Canada, US, Mexico, pipelines and facilities and storage assets, energy assets ranging all across those three countries. Some of the challenges that we specifically face are, quite frankly, the breadth and distance that we have to cover with our program. In Canada alone, we go from essentially Montreal to Kitimat, and a good amount of up and down in between. And so that means we have to find, optimized ways or effective ways of getting to all of our facilities to meet the compliance requirements here in Canada. Beyond that, again, like we have challenges, marrying up compliance requirements across Canada, the US, and Mexico, and how can we do work effectively and as common as possible across those different jurisdictions, because when we do work the same way, it makes us effective, it makes us fast, it makes it cost effective. So, those are some of the unique challenges that we deal with on my team.
Yeah, and I mean those distances are pretty fast. To put it into context for some of our US audience who may not know Kitimat, I mean, if you're spanning all of Canada, this is like 5,000, 6,000 kilometers, like 4,000 miles probably from east to west. And then, one of the things I found really interesting, learning from you, is how inaccessible some of the sites are. Like, can you speak a little bit to accessibility and some of the conditions that the field crews might face in trying to access some of the facilities?
Yeah, like well over 90% of our facilities usually have some degree of a good access road, but some of those roads might require, cooperation with another operator who actually owns the road. So we have to get permits to be on their property and let them know we're going to be in the area. And a number of our facilities are fly-in only. Like we can't get cell service. You're lucky if you have reliable satellite service in those areas. So we're flying up on helicopters to try and get into those areas.
That adds a whole new dimension of cost and complexity if you want to do an LDAR survey and you have to drive your helicopter to work.
Absolutely.
Let's get into a little bit of the work that we've done. Can you share a bit about the optimization work itself? What inspired it, and I know it's something you've been working on for quite a while. What are some of the benefits that you realized from doing this work in terms of cost and safety and emissions?
Yeah. So I think TC's LDAR journey really began in 2019 when we started to have to comply with Canadian regulation coming in, with some of the US Quado regulations coming in. And we sat down and basically said, just meet compliance requirements and run that program. And that was a significant challenge across the thousands of assets that we have to get to across all the countries that we operate in. And I think we've done a really great job at coming up to a base level of competency, and in fact, I think leading level of competency very quickly. But once we got a program that worked and was repeatable and successful, we had an opportunity to sit back and say, well, what are we learning from the data that we're getting? What are we learning from all the repairs? And how can we make our work better? And we were seeing that statistically, some of our compressor stations were a much higher risk threat for emissions than our meter stations or our well sites, like storage wells. 90% of the time, if we go to a compressor station, we will find something that we have to remediate. 90% of the time, when we go to any of our other facilities, we don't. And so, how can we do that work smarter and tackle the things that are more meaningful to us? On top of that, in the Canadian program alone, I think we were driving over 800,000 kilometers, and I don't have the freedom unit conversion for that. But we were driving over 800,000 kilometers a year with our technicians to get to all these facilities, and we were doing multiple fly-in days, and we were trying to find ways to minimize that, road exposure. So what we did was we took all our statistical data and we put it into Highwood's big fancy simulation tool. And we use that to test a number of our assumptions around, potential ways to do the work better. Do we prioritize certain areas over another? Do we prioritize certain tools for detection over another? Do we prioritize different frequencies? And I think what we were able to effectively, validate was, our assertion that certain facilities represent a higher risk was true, and that there are mechanisms to prioritize those facilities while providing less attention to other facilities, and then balance an overall program. And so within at least the Canadian program, you have the option to do an alt LDAR with your regulator. So we applied for our alternative program, leveraging the data and the studies that we had done to say, hey, we think we can do better here, and this is how we're going to do it. And that was approved. We executed for a year, and the program actually blew our expectations out of the water. We were able to reduce our kilometer exposure for our technicians almost by half. So
Wow.
that's a huge safety improvement, first and foremost. So that's probably the biggest win. We saw some minor cost improvements. They were on the order of like 5%, but anything's helpful. And where we thought the program would actually achieve an equivalent emission reduction, we were actually able to reduce our emissions by 20% from the year before. So that took a huge chunk of our fugitives off the table. And effectively, that was just us going to the higher risk facilities more frequently, getting the repairs done faster, and not leaving those emission opportunities on the table.
That's really amazing, especially the safety stats. I mean, one of the things that I'm curious about is, okay, so first off, not a lot of operators, everyone's collecting data. Not a lot of operators are using that data, analyzing it, and turning it into a better, more bespoke strategy, whether it's for measurement or mitigation. And so, but you can only be as good as the data you have at any given moment, and you can adapt, and then you get new data, and then you adapt again. So are you finding that as the years go by and you continue to look at your strategy, you're honing in, you're getting more clarity and focus on what you ought to be focusing on?
Yeah, absolutely. And, that allows us to challenge preconceived notions that we had. I remember, once upon a time I worked with an engineer who thought flanges and, imperfect torquing were one of our largest threats. And, really wanted to put a lot of focus on mitigating those. Um, but the data really doesn't show that, and shows we have, other types of materials that we should be focusing on. And that's allowed us to develop specific engineering protocol to respond to those types of failures faster. And then, better inspection protocol to, prioritize extra layers of attention to things that are more likely to leak. Again, as we talk about the optimization activity, that we can go really deep into it. So yeah, it allows us to really hone in on what's important. It allows us to challenge maybe some of our preconceived notions, and then even just continuously improve. We're currently working on collaboration with some of our other business unit counterparts to say, what extra data can we get that's going to help some of our triage processes to give operations more information about the way they work, and some of the correctives we can put in place.
That's fantastic. As you know, and as everybody knows, there's so many different technologies emerging. There's so many different standards and protocols, and it feels like the ground is shifting beneath our feet, like almost on a daily basis. As you and as TC Energy, as you look to the future, what do you think the biggest opportunities are for improving the way that we find, attribute, characterize, and ideally, ultimately mitigate methane emission sources?
Well, that's a tough one, and it's really going to vary from operator to operator. And I think that was kind of what I was trying to get at with the presentation that I gave in Austin that you alluded to, is that every operator is going to have unique challenges that they need to prioritize, and they need to do the work to understand where their sources are and how to best fix them. For TC, our OGI based program is proving extremely effective, but we are, eagerly looking into aerial programs that can support that. TC also inspects our entire right of way several times a year, to make sure that there's no mechanical damage, to make sure there's no third party activities that we're unaware of along our right of way. And then, furthermore, to look for leaks or potential, other signs of problems. How can we blend that into our methane mitigation program? That's one of the areas we're actively exploring. We've done a lot of work looking into CEM technologies, and we think that's an exciting opportunity. Continuous emission monitoring. I keep calling them by their acronym. And while that, is exciting, the odd distribution of facilities that I have can sometimes make it challenging for those things to do their job 100% of the time accurately. But similarly, if you look at, another maybe upstream facility that has very densely packed equipment, an OGI program might be extra challenging because you can't get around all that equipment to properly see with the cameras. So their CEM systems might be extremely effective. Flyovers, even more so. So it really comes down to the operators understanding the shape, mix, and matrix of their assets, and testing out these different tools, and seeing what has worked for their peers, and talking to the community and saying, hey, this was really effective for me, you should try this here, or this wasn't effective for me, but you're different and you should try it as well.
Yeah, that really resonates with our experience as well. There's so many different factors, from technology to regulations to environment to operations to facility types, and even supply chain segment, equipment. Like that's why there's so many technologies that have emerged, because it seems like you need a slightly different strategy no matter where you go. Obviously, simulation is a tool that you leveraged in this case. You can apply the same tool to all problems. There's always a time and a place. Do you have any advice for operators who are maybe looking at this new technology, who are considering leveraging simulation to improve the efficiency of their leak detection programs? Is it worth it?
Yeah, the simulation is 100% worth it. I think the real advice I have for you is that the more data you're able to get around your emission sources, be it vented or fugitive, the further all that data is going to go in your simulation activities, right? Like if you can get down to the subcomponent level of your emission sources, if you know that certain activities are extremely periodic but highly, consequential, um, those are going to influence the results of your simulation. So collect the data, do the work to make sure you can ingest that data in an effective means as well. I think, I joined my emissions team when it had already been stood up, and I was just amazed by their capabilities uh, coming into it, and, the amount of data we were managing. And how well set up it was for me to come into it. Like, I just get to speak about all the great work my team does, and they're the real horsepower.
I feel the same way. I'm becoming less and less relevant, and I don't know what everybody's working on. Andy, thanks so much for joining Monday Morning Methane. Thanks for your leadership on methane emissions and pushing forward and being so innovative in this space. I'll see you at the gym, or at least next time we talk, I'll report back. I'll be able to jump higher at the very least, thanks to your program.
I want to see a spike on some people, Thomas.
Yeah, yeah. I'll invite you to my pro volleyball world tour game. Yeah. Okay. Take care, Andy. Thanks.
Thanks, Thomas.